And thank you all for joining the webinar today. We'll be talking about the technology, policy, and economics of creating safer roads. I'm your moderator. My name is Abby Buchibabu, and I'm the VP of Product at Cambridge Mobile Telematics. And I'm thrilled to be here today with our distinguished panel of road safety experts. I want to give some context as to why we're here today. So we know that vehicles are safer than ever. A lot of technology has been invested in making sure they're safer. Yet every year, over 1.3 million people are killed and 50 million people are injured on the road. This also results in $1.3 trillion in economic damages globally. Now, in the United States, over 42,000 people were killed in 2021, and that's the highest number we've seen in 16 years. Pedestrian fatalities have surged to 40-year high, and cyclist deaths have reached levels that we have not seen since the 90s. So we're here today to understand what's really behind this deadly trend. Drunk driving is illegal in every state, yet distracted driving is not. Just over half the states have hands-free phone laws. In fact, NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, says distracted driving might just be 6 times more dangerous than drunk driving. And experts say both drunk driving and distracted driving can kill over 12,000 people every year. Distracted driving has surged over the past few years. So how can we make roads and drivers safer? The answer might just be in the unique blend of bringing together technology, policy, and economics that drive consumer behavior. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists today, who are experts from the area of technology, public policy, road safety, academia, and insurance. So I'd love to start with someone who I've had the privilege of working with, who I call my mentor, Hari Balakrishnan. Hi, Hari.
Hi, Abby. Good to be here.
Awesome. Hari is a professor of computer science at MIT. He is the 2023 Marconi Fellow, recognized for his groundbreaking work in wired, wireless networking, mobile sensing, distributed systems. He's also the CTO and co-founder of Cambridge Mobile Telematics with the mission to make the world's roads and drivers safer. Next, we have Steve Kiefer. Welcome, Steve.
Good afternoon, Abby. Great to be here with you.
Awesome. Steve's a former General Motors executive who, following the tragic death of his son, Mitchell, in 2016, who was a victim of distracted driving, founded a really important foundation called the Kiefer Foundation. This foundation is dedicated to ending distracted driving and preventing related fatalities. Next, I'd love to introduce Amanda Mazureski. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Abby.
Welcome. Amanda is the VP of Product at Travelers. She's playing a key role in adapting some of the emerging technologies and trends in the auto industry for personal auto. We also have another expert from the insurance space, Precious Naduli. Welcome.
Hi, Abby. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Precious is a director of marketing at Discovery Insurance South Africa, and her work emphasizes the importance of product positioning and behavioral economics in enhancing road safety through telematics and incentives. Now I have a few from the academia world. So I'd love to introduce Dr. Kit Delgado. Welcome, Dr. Kit Delgado.
Hi, Abby. Great to be here.
Awesome. Kit is an associate professor of emergency medicine and epidemiology at University of Pennsylvania. His research focuses on applying behavioral and data science to improve public health. He's focused a lot on safety issues related to distracted and alcohol-impaired driving. So excited to hear from him. And next, and finally, Dr. Todd Shern. Welcome, Todd.
Hello, Abby. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Todd is an associate professor of computer science from Howard University, and Dr. Shern is inspiring young people by playing a pivotal role in actively building programs that get students involved in building some of this tech. So I'd love to first kick it off to Hari. Hari, with your contributions in bringing some of the technology to solve some of these really hard problems, can you give us a high-level overview of the road safety problems we're facing today and why they're just so incredibly challenging to overcome?
Oh, thank you all. So first of all, I want to thank the Marconi Society and CMT for putting this panel together. And really thank you to my fellow panelists who are experts in many of the different areas that we need to bring to bear to tackle these pretty challenging problems. And thank you, Abby, for moderating today. So I want to start by putting these numbers that Abby mentioned in context. 1.35 million fatalities, 50 million injuries worldwide. What do those numbers mean? Well, to put it in context, in the 1 hour of this panel, what that means is 150 people will have died and between 4,000 and 5,000 people injured on roads worldwide. It's a pretty big number. So just sometimes it helps to think about what happens in the next hour, and it's pretty significant. Road safety trends have actually been worsening. And it's not a recent new trend. If you go back as far back as 2010, which was about the time that with my co-founders, Sam Madden and Bill Powers, we started CMT, and that was based on 5 years of prior academic work at MIT. We've been looking at these trends, but if you go as far back as 2010, I sort of divided up in two phases, 2010 to 2020, and then what happened post 2020 with the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. Year-on-year comparisons look up and down in that 10-year period between 2010 and 2020, but there's a clear upward trend if you take a decade-long perspective. Even normalizing for more driving, what we find is that crash costs and the amount of crashes, crash costs, crash frequencies, the rate of crashes, even accounting for the increase in driving, show an upward trend. And crash costs outstrip inflation by as much as 70% in the US and the Western world. And since the pandemic, things have actually worsened quite a bit more, especially in the US and in many other parts of the world. Europe actually has not worsened as much, but most other parts of the world have worsened. And for example, in the US, serious crashes, if you take year 2019 and compare that to 2022, serious crashes have gone up 20% per mile driven. So it's not that there are more crashes because there's more driving. When you normalize, it's increased. And there are several reasons for this, but a predominant cause are our phones. I call them weapons of mass distraction. And sometimes correlation is not causation, but I think in this case, there's a lot of evidence that it is causative. And that, in fact, 2010 is about when smartphones started really rising in terms of their penetration in among our people. And in fact, I would challenge anyone here to spend 1 hour of their regular waking day not touching their phone. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, I know I can't do it. It's really, really difficult. So the amount of distraction has gone up. And this is not just somebody using a navigation application, but really equivalent to taking their eyes off the road. It now is well over 2 minutes of distracted driving per hour of driving. I want to put that in perspective. It takes about 3 seconds at 50 miles an hour to drive the length of a football field. So 2 minutes is many, many, many football fields, and that's per hour of driving. And I think that's really had a significant role to play, even though cars have actually become safer. The other two aspects here are cars have become safer, but they've actually become more confusing to use in many ways. There's lots of ADAS systems, and it's not clear whether people actually enable them. Sometimes they may even be distracted by them. And the third part is our public infrastructure that in some ways has not kept up with many of the changes that have happened in mobility. I just want to end here by saying that it's not all doom and gloom, and we'll find that today. There are definite successes in policy improvements and in incentivization with things like telematics-based programs that are now being offered to more and more people to make roads safer by making drivers more aware and smarter. And we're going to see some of that and discuss some of that today. I also think the data collected in a very anonymized fashion and at large scale can be used and is slowly being used to improve public infrastructure and vehicle design and inform policy decisions so they become more data-driven. So I'm actually quite optimistic about the future and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you for laying out these trends, Hari. I'd like to kick it to you, Amanda. Insurers are an integral part of some of the solutions to road safety, improving road safety. And I'd just like to get your take on some of the trends Hari's laid out and what concerns you as the insurer the most.
Thanks for the question. And I thought that was a great level set by Hari right up front. So at Travelers, we are driven to be the best at helping people protect the things that matter most. Insurers are always monitoring their own data as well as industry information that is available in order to manage their business. So as we are looking to fulfill the promise of the commitment, we're managing the data overall and individually. And so one of the data points utilized that Hari touched upon is the term frequency, which shows how often an accident occurs over the total risks insured. One of the things that is of most concern is really the increase in fatality rate in the post-pandemic timeframe within the US. You mentioned it up front, Abby, in terms of it's at a 16-year high in 2021. And certainly while a specific root cause is never perfect to pinpoint, there's certainly evidence of greater levels of distraction with increasing speeds, which can really be a deadly combination. And this is occurring, Hari touched on it briefly, but occurring while there's more safety features than ever built within vehicles than we've ever had before. And so really from an insurer perspective, we're looking at all of that. And it's certainly concerning as we evaluate the impacts to our customers.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I'd love, Precious, your take here as well in this concept of reducing frequency that Amanda mentions. How is Discover Insure thinking about this, and particularly around some of the successful programs you've been able to put in the market around incentivizing drivers?
Yeah, so thank you, and great context from Amanda and Hari as well. And just to add a bit of context from a South African perspective, so our fatality rate is actually 22 per 100,000, which is 40% higher than the US. So we actually have one of the worst fatalities in the world. And what we've actually learned is that people also have what we call an overconfidence bias. So when we launched the program, we asked people via survey, do you think, how would you rate yourself as a poor or a good driver? And you'll find that most people will rate themselves as a good driver. In fact, they overstated it by 12 times, up to 12 times when we actually measured them using tech. So this proves the fact, to Hari's point, is that this is actually a difficult problem to solve because most people actually think they're a good driver. And what we found, as Hari stated, the roads are getting better, cars are getting better. What is not getting better is behavior. We find that actually 60% of fatalities are as a result of behavior. Some of the behaviors that have been mentioned, such as, aggressive driving, obviously distracted driving, and all of those things. So how do you actually start to shift that behavior? That's where Vitality Drive, which is our behavioral platform in the Discover Insure ecosystem, has made a difference. And we really have kind of 4 levers. The first is our understanding of behavioral economics. So how do you actually get people to change? A key part of this for us is loss aversion. So we have a point structure. At the beginning, people start off. So we found that the loss aversion system is much more powerful in improving driving behavior. So you start the day with points. If you drive well, you keep them. If you drive badly, you lose them over the day. And this is and all the points that you bank build up to a status. The higher the status, the better. And then what we've layered on that, in terms of the higher status being diamond, is best rewards. So we found in our world that premium discounts don't work as well as real powerful incentives. So for example, for our best drivers, we give discounts on fuel, discounts on Uber, discounts on car maintenance, discounts, various discounts. We do also give our best drivers don't get a premium increase, so they get a 0% increase. So various rewards. We've actually structured long-term rewards as well as short-term rewards. So for example, on a weekly basis, we have what we call active rewards. You have a goal every week, and if you drive well, it unlocks like a weekly goal through Discovery Miles. So we've gamified the whole system. We've layered rewards, which actually leads to improvement up front, but also sustains it over time by sort of gamifying the whole process and really having expertise in terms of rewards as well, which we've gained across the group, because obviously our group is now in 40 markets, various partnerships, particularly on the health side, making people healthier. And we took that learning and we put it into driving behavior for Discover Insure specifically.
Wow, that's a lot of change and impact you've made. And I think you highlighting some of what really matters to drivers in terms of short-term incentives and long-term incentives is really interesting. And I'd love to pick on you next, Dr. Delgado. You've done extensive research on the strategies insurers use to change driving behavior, and you've just heard from Precious on some of the things that they've done in South Africa. Could you deep dive into this and share a little bit about some of your papers that mention ideas around social comparisons and financial incentives to help us think through what really motivates drivers to improve?
Yeah, I just love what Precious just said, because it sort of very much speaks to where I think there's so much opportunity. Just as a background, why as an emergency physician here, I work in a trauma center that sees a lot of car crashes, and I've taken care of many patients who've come in, distracted driving, drunk driving, patients who have died, unfortunately. But also, I ask people, what happened? And, a typical story is, I was just driving down the highway, through the city, and, the ping goes off in the phone. I reached down to get it, fell out of the cup holder. Next thing I know, I'm slamming into the guardrail, right? And then, just this one story is this individual was about to go to Wall Street, graduating from one of the colleges in Philadelphia. He's a really smart guy, knows he shouldn't be doing this, and yet you feel compelled to do this because it's an impulse that's really hard to stop. And so I think about things from when I see in the emergency department, all these injuries and problems and health behaviors people know that they shouldn't be doing them, but do it anyway. And how do we address that? And I really like the concept of behavioral economics and really understanding, what are the cognitive biases that prevent us from doing what's in our best interest, and trying to solve for those things. And so, we launched a series of research supported by the Federal Highway Administration in partnership with Progressive Insurance and their Snapshot product. And so our key contact there was Bill Everett. And we tested, and we did a series of tests. So the first one was just seeing experimentally, does, compared to just educating people on the risks of distracted driving, could we then make people, and we found the same exact thing in our research. 90% of drivers thought they were an above average driver, which has been replicated many times. So people are overconfident. So one of the first things that we did was we compared their weekly amount of phone use compared to other customers, and to provide that social comparison and sort of level set. Actually, you're doing worse than the majority of drivers. The second thing we did is that we wanted to see, okay, compared to a standard discount, which you would get at the end of a policy period, what if we take that amount of money and say, hey, we're going to pay you a set amount each week, the same amount, but we're going to withhold that, if you use your phone above a certain threshold. So what that's saying is we're leveraging loss aversion, just like Precious was saying. And then if they didn't meet their, they use their phone too much, we created regret in terms of like, you could have earned this, but instead you got less money. But we gave everyone a fresh start. And then we also tried increasing the amount of incentives. And what we found in this first study was that compared to sort of the status quo way of doing insurance, that providing these rewards more frequently and leveraging these behavioral economics reduced phone use by about over a minute per hour, which Hari was saying, around 2 minutes per hour. So that's like a big behavior change. But what we also found in this very first one is that as soon as we turned off, that sort of engagement and the gamification, that people reverted back to their behaviors. So we did a second study where we sort of said, okay, how can we build long-lasting habits? And so we took some of the things that worked, that frequent engagement, the social competition. We started making people improve from their baseline. And we actually grouped drivers into groups of 10 of people that they didn't know. And we created a weekly contest where they were trying to compete against each other to reduce their phone use. And they got they increased in points if they did well and meet their weekly goal, and they lost points if they didn't. And And what we found was that that led to even greater sustainments, even among high-risk drivers, reducing 2 minutes per hour of driving. And that behavior change lasted after we took away the program. And so basically the main take home is that, there's a huge opportunity with this technology to drive behavior at scale. And there's a huge opportunity to test different behavioral engagement approaches, leveraging insights from behavioral economics and behavioral science. And I think now the question is, how do we scale this up more broadly within a users-based insurance context? And I think the Discovery program is a great example of how that's been done.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Those are some impressive results, and we've read those papers and are intimately familiar with it at CMT as well. And I think you mentioned something really interesting, which is around sort of blending in some of the results that you're seeing with some of the work that Amanda and Precious are working on. I'd like to kind of shift focus towards thinking about the policy aspect here as well. Steve, I'd love your perspective on some of the work you've done with policymakers through your Kiefer Foundation to change regulation. Specifically, could you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what your foundation does, and how do you specifically engage with policymakers to make change happen?
Great. Well, thank you, Abby. Yeah, first of all, we established the Kiefer Foundation about 7 years ago. As Abby mentioned, my son Mitchell was killed by a distracted driver in Michigan a little over 7 years ago. And of course, when this happens to your family and you start to dig into the data and the cause, and you find out that, of course, the stats say that 10 people every day are killed by distracted drivers in this country. Recently, NHTSA has bumped that number up to closer to 30, and most experts would say it's probably closer to 50. So imagine 50 people each day in this country being killed by distracted drivers. It's horrific. We established the Kiefer Foundation with a goal to bring an end to distracted driving in honor of my son, Mitchell. And we have 3 pillars that we focus on. First of all is awareness. It's been mentioned a couple of times here, but we kicked off an awareness campaign a couple of years ago with the help of Tom Brady and Mark Wahlberg and some other celebrities. Our message is really quite simple. When you're behind the wheel of a car, put your phones down and just drive. That has helped create awareness, and there's a number of other things. But as some have mentioned here on this webinar already, when we look at surveys, we find that about 94% of the population understands it's a dangerous behavior to be looking at the phone while driving. Yet some 84% admit that they still do it. So awareness alone would not be enough. Technology, of course, is our second pillar, and we are already talking about a number of things, including the technology that Cambridge Mobile Telematics provides, which has been instrumental in helping us make the case for legislation, which is, of course, the third pillar. So again, 3 pillars of awareness, technology, and legislation. When we come to legislation, we have been working on what we call hands-free USA. So in every state that we're working, this happens to be hands-free Michigan, but we promote hands-free laws, as we call them. They're distracted driving laws that make it illegal to hold the phone while you're driving the automobile. It's a primary offense, so officers can identify it and pull drivers over, and there's fines that range from below $100 to several $100s. This is, of course, not new. This is legislation that around the world in most development countries, you wouldn't think of holding your phone while driving a car. Yet in the US, we still have several states that have not enacted these laws. We've been successful now in 29 states. So 29 states now have these hand-free laws. And in every state that these laws are adopted, we get about a 10 to 20% reduction in crashes and fatalities. And if it's accompanied with a really good awareness campaign and a really good enforcement campaign, those numbers can be quite sticky and actually quite a bit larger. So we are actively working around the country. And as we say, we're not going to stop until we get all 50 states done. We've got about 15 priority states that we're working on right now. And you asked about, how we engage. I mean, it is really hand-to-hand combat. We have a model bill that we use with traditional language, and we give it to legislators in each state. We usually pull together a lot of victims' families, and you heard the numbers that Abby cited in the beginning. I mean, there's another 1.3 million victims' families every year that are brought into this unfortunate fold. So we bring victims' families together. We approach legislators. We find people like-minded in every state. We find people that will be bill sponsors, hopefully bipartisan bill sponsors. And then we work through the process. I will tell you, as all of you know, traffic laws are state laws, so you have to do it over and over again 50 times, and we'll continue at this. I can talk more about some of the pushback, but I would just say that for something that seems so obvious to most people, such common sense, so non-controversial. Again, we're not talking about abortion or gun control here. We're talking about something that everybody should buy into. Yet when we did this in Michigan, it took us 5 years from the first concept to actually getting our governor to sign it into law last June. So we're going to continue to work at this. We do think that legislation is fundamental. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to Cambridge Mobile Telematics, because the telematics data that we're able to bring to each state to show them exactly how bad the distraction rates are in their counties, in their cities, at different times of day, it's really been helpful in making the case. And if you think about it, we think these laws are kind of analogous to the very stiff drunk driving laws in the 80s and 90s. Once the laws were put in place and there was a organization like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers sitting in the courtroom making sure that the laws were enforced, while drunk driving has not been eliminated, it certainly has been reduced. And we know that it's socially unacceptable to be driving a car while you're intoxicated. We're not there yet with distracted driving, but we'll get there. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. And I loved how you started by kind of saying that there's 3 pillars: awareness, technology, policy. That really resonates here. And thank you so much for doing all of the hard work for pushing these laws across all 50 states. I want to touch on awareness a little bit more and kind of the bridge between awareness and technology. And Todd, I want to kick it to you. You're doing a lot of work in inspiring young people to develop technologies from an early stage in their career. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work you've been doing?
Sure. And I want to kind of piggyback on the pillars that Steve mentioned, because I am working with young people, and as a computer science professor, many of the students expressed the interest of developing an app. That's what computer scientists do. We develop apps, and they want to develop an app that they thought was not only socially relevant, but impactful. So they were very aware of the challenges of distracted driving. And so they wanted to understand how they could potentially address it. And thanks to Cambridge Mobile Telematics making the API available, our students were able to create an app, which we're calling DC Driver, because we're Washington, DC based, which will measure trips in the Washington, DC area and provide feedback to young drivers about things like acceleration, cornering, braking, and the other elements that are a part of safe driving. One of the things that we have learned from the students is that they are most engaged when they are actually a part of the solution. And so we're really looking forward to seeing what type of data we can collect with this app. Right now, it isn't available, but it will be available in the next week or two in the Washington, D.C. area. So again, we're happy to participate with everyone. And the first 2 pillars, awareness and technology, we're on. Even though we're located in DC, we're going to hand that off to Steve and the other folks to work on the policy. But just know, A, that young people are aware and engaged, and B, they actually want to do something about it with technology. And they also want to look at how technology can link them through social media, like we're talking about scoring trips, but also looking at how their scoring of trips compares to their peers, their parents, their neighborhood, and other affinity groups that they may be a part of.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Todd. And I know a lot of the folks that you're working with are also involved in partnering with CMT on some of our tech. This is great. Kit, I'd love to kind of get your take here as well, since you've done so many studies in the space, and kind of drawing upon some of the things Todd mentioned. What are some of the hypotheses you had going into some of these studies? And did you find any of them to be challenged or go against your intuition? What were your key learnings, and what do you want the audience here to take away from them?
Yeah, I think that so one of the hypotheses is that education and awareness is essential and critical, and so are laws. But we still, I still see patients in the emergency department who know all these things are true and they know they're breaking the law, and that sometimes, despite our best efforts, we have really strong challenges with willpower. And so I think one of the hypotheses that even when we sort of made people aware of the laws that were, it's illegal in your state to do this, and they've been educated on the risks with what we think is like, the best, information that we can provide, that people still use their phone. And so, but combining that and with sort of the real-time feedback on a weekly basis and leveraging things like real-time rewards and social pressure and gamification, that can help increase motivation and keep people engaged, because that motivation not to do something because of a law or knowing the risks is just how human behavior works. And so I think you need both. But I think what our research is showing is that you have to keep that sort of constant engagement and to get people to sort of make progress and do this. I think one of the other things that we're testing right now is that, we did all our work focusing just on distracted driving, but insurers, are not just rating on distracted driving, they're rating on hard braking and hard accelerations and all the other things that contribute to crashes. And one of the studies that we're doing right now, funded by the AAA Foundation, is we're kind of testing, okay, compared to like the standard way usage-based insurance is done, where you get feedback on all your behaviors, does it make sense to like make people focus on the thing that they're the worst at, whether it's distracted driving or speeding or slamming on the brakes? Or does it make sense to have people have a little skin in the game or autonomy and sort of pick like, okay, I'm going to focus on this week and see how you do? And there's some evidence from other contexts that's showing that when people are more engaged, like Todd was saying, and sort of get to pick what they want to work on and that behavior, that they do better. And so we're hoping to provide some evidence about, should we just be doing it the way that we're doing it, or should we have people really choose their goals and their behaviors and what they want to work on and keep people more engaged over the long term?
That's really interesting to kind of think about it from the perspective of pick a specific goal, not all of the key factors that maybe we're capturing from telematics, like acceleration, braking, speeding. Don't boil the ocean, just pick one thing and focus. That's super interesting. And Amanda, I'd love to get your thoughts here too, because you've been involved in kind of launching this super successful usage-based insurance program through Travelers and the Travelers Institute. Could you share a little bit more about the IntelliDrive program, how it works, and some of the key findings that Kit mentioned?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do so. So at Travelers, our telematics program, IntelliDrive, is a mobile cell phone application that monitors your driving behavior and uses 5 key measures. So as Dr. Kit mentioned, not just looking at distraction, but looking at braking, acceleration, speed, time of day, and distraction. The app can provide you with real-time and personalized feedback with the trips that you take day to day. So you've got that live interaction with the app to share with you how you're progressing and doing day to day with your trips. In addition to the feedback, IntelliDrive can help drivers save money on their insurance premium. So you mentioned the Travelers Institute. The Travelers Institute recently partnered with Cambridge Mobile Telematics on a paper entitled "Every Second Matters: Reducing Distracted Driving, One Voice at a Time." And really similar to a lot of the studies and research that Dr. Kit shared, we shared how telematics programs can help safety. Specifically, drivers who are engaged in a telematics incentive program were 28% more likely to remain in their safe driving range than drivers who didn't. And additionally, drivers who use the telematics program and engage in their app are more than three times a week are shown to be 65% safer across all risk events relative to other drivers, right? So really good if you're participating, even better if you're participating and you're engaging in the app regularly. These drivers are also 57% less distracted by their cell phone. And so, I think that these statistics are really compelling in terms of demonstrating using telematics can lead to safer and more attentive driving.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you say engagement, you do mean outside of driving periods.
Outside of driving periods. Finish your trip, and check how you did. Absolutely.
That's great. Precious, I want to come back to you and your sort of explanation earlier about just the Vitality program around the number of incentives you've provided that I'm presuming also impacts engagement in a good way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about engagement and what role it plays here. And also, could you highlight some of just the top level improvements you've seen? Just if you have some numbers, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I mean, agree with Amanda and Dr. Kit in terms of engagement. I mean, engagement is critical. So similarly, I mean, as you obviously we've partnered with Cambridge Mobile Telematics as well in terms of our app and tag solution. So we use both the app and the tag solution affixed to the vehicle because the tag is more accurate. So definitely, I mean, clients are able to see their driving behavior every single day after they finish their trips, and that definitely improves engagement. And on top of that, we've layered rewards. And so what we've seen is that the clients who actually earn rewards are more likely to stay. They have almost a 90% actually increase in or improvement in lapse or persistency, which is great for us as an insurance company. So that's the benefit, in addition to fewer and less severe claims. So in terms of what we've seen, so as I said, we have upfront improvement, almost 15% improvement upfront within the first 30 days, and that improvement is sustained over time. And then from a risk perspective, which is critical from an insurance perspective, we see that our best drivers have an almost 60% lower loss ratio, which is a combination of frequency and severity. So they have fewer claims, much fewer claims. And also when they do have a claim, a good driver actually has the quantum of the claim, the average amount, which is what we call severity, is actually much lower. So it actually is very beneficial for us. So therefore, because the thinking from other insurers is that how do you fund these rewards? You actually fund these rewards from the savings that you make from a loss ratio perspective. So that actually becomes what we call, that's why we call it the shared value model, because it becomes the self-fulfilling cycle that actually benefits all stakeholders. So obviously clients benefit because they have better risk, they're safer on the road, they're less likely to be in an accident, they earn rewards. It's beneficial to us as an insurer because we have fewer claims, which leads to better persistency, so lower lapses, which leads to better profits. And then ultimately to society, there's a spillover effect in terms of creating safer roads. And aligned to CMT, our purpose is to create a nation of great drivers. And that customer engagement is critical to that outcome.
Thank you for sharing that. Feels like a win-win-win almost. It feels like a no-brainer for not sort of deploying some of these strategies. I'd like to come back to you, Steve, to talk a little bit about this sort of framework that insurers are taking on this win-win-win strategy. What's the challenge for policymakers to adopt something similar? So my question is really around, why don't states penalize drivers for distracted driving? And do you see a roadmap that in your learnings you found that states who haven't adopted hands-free laws that they could start to do?
Yeah, first of all, I want to start positive because we do have 29 states that have adopted the laws, and we are seeing positive results there. So it's frustrating how difficult it is. But as I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's one of the elements that we find very, very helpful, and I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again, is this outstanding telematics data that we are able to generate with the help of Cambridge Mobile Telematics. Those reports that they'll do for us in every state are really quite compelling, because what I would say to you is, I think there's a lot of legislators and a lot of people that have opinions on some of these things. Maybe they think, laws won't work because people won't follow them, or that they won't actually be effective at changing behavior. The other pushback is often about civil liberties. Don't tell me what I can do in my car. Give me, you're imposing on my personal freedom. And of course, we all say that that's just fine unless your freedom is causing, loss of life for others. So those are some of the arguments that we face, and then some of the tools we use to improve it. And then back to the safe driving apps in general. When we go around the country speaking about awareness, technology, and legislation, I often poll the group on how many people are aware of these safe driving apps and how many are using them. And it's always less than 5%. So it's quite shocking to me that we don't have greater penetration of this. I think that's a challenge for all of us. Sometimes people will bring up privacy concerns. I think those are ill-founded, and we have to continue to educate people that that's not an issue. But for the people that I know that have used it, and of course, you got all of our biggest fans right here on the webinar, we know that they're addictive. It's a very addictive app in a positive way. We're extremely cautious in how we drive because we want that score to be well above 90 every time we drive. And that kind of change in behavior is really effective. And then, of course, who doesn't want to get a significant price reduction on their insurance rates? So we hope that through activities like this and further promoting this technology, we'll start boosting that penetration rate up much higher in the coming months and years.
That's really great to hear. Sorry, I'm a little distracted by all the questions coming through, which is really exciting to see. And I think there might be a couple here for you, Steve. But Barry, do you want me to start asking questions, or did you want to pick a few?
Abby, I've been watching the questions coming in as well. And one of the first ones that came in was directed toward the relationship between traffic congestion and this whole issue of mobile phone usage. You know, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm late for a meeting. You know, that's almost compelling me to pick up my phone. And I think the questioner was wondering, is there any way to sort of connect this with other technologies for reducing congestion, and mentioning in particular platooning and lane separation? So I don't know if anybody on the panel would like to address congestion coupled with distracted driving.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that I think we didn't clarify this, but when we talk about phone distraction here, we're talking about distraction that's happening above 10 miles an hour. So we're not talking about those. If you include that time when people are stuck and moving, inching lower than 10 miles an hour, it's way more than 2 minutes per hour of driving, particularly congestion. So I think, you know, what's interesting is in fact that about 30% of significant phone distractions happening above 50 miles an hour. So this isn't really a situation where, well, because of congestion, I have nothing else to do, I'm looking at my phone, although I do believe people do that, and you need it for navigation. Some of these technologies, certainly in the research world, have been, you know, proposed for now coming up on 30 years from the 90s, and it boils down to deployability. I think that the ability to change public infrastructure, particularly in a scalable way, to get these things actioned and done is quite difficult. My own feeling and prediction, speaking of platooning or dedicated lanes, is that I suspect that that is actually the way in which autonomy will start getting introduced. It's a lot easier to do that when you have dedicated lanes, and maybe you start deploying some of those technologies by doing it at night on some of the lanes, because night driving is more dangerous, but there's less traffic. So maybe you dedicate a lane at night, you run the experiments, you see how the results come about, and you incrementally deploy infrastructure.
I kind of want to also get Kit's perspective here too. And I think combine that with another question that came through that talks about modern vehicles just having complex interfaces where there's a ton of screens and heads-up displays. So how do you think that's affecting safety on the road?
Yeah, I think in the question there was this, and this is sort of a common thread, and why if you interview people, like why they use their phone while driving, and you know there's both impulsive use, which is like I'm going to go check my notifications on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, but then there's also, you know, like the phone is an extension of the car and just sort of, you know, keeping in touch, and you know, most people are willing to give up the impulsive use, but if they need, you know, someone needs to get a hold of them for work or family reasons, urgent reasons, they, you know, no one's going to give that up. And so our approach is it's somewhat also a shift, you know, influenced by like a public health approach, and I'm also board certified in addiction medicine as well, and we sort of focus on harm reduction, and we sort of say, okay, if you're going to be using your phone in the car, like for these kinds of things, use it hands-free. And so we focus a lot of our like coaching that we deliver and sort of push notification type tips about, sort of, if you don't know how to use like Apple CarPlay, so that people can call you or get in touch with you, like this is how you do it. And we have like a tutorial on how to do it and things like that. And so that we successfully switched people from, use more handheld use to hands-free use, and can show that can be done. And we know that from the studies on, where people have been monitored and studied, that the risk of crashing is much higher from handheld use because you're taking your eyes off the road and looking at the phone. So I think to address that concern, I would sort of say that person, like shift to hands-free use as much as you can.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I think another really interesting question that came through, I'd love to ask, sort of related to this, to Steve, where Kitten and some of the insurers are talking about these usage-based apps, but one of the questions from one of the attendees is around what's the counter argument around this that you're seeing from legislators? Are folks concerned about privacy issues, and how are they kind of talking about that?
Yeah, I would tell you that the feedback is pretty consistent across all the states, and a lot of it is, it's due to lack of knowledge or an awareness of some of the aspects of this. I mentioned it earlier, but first and foremost, the biggest pushback we get is the civil liberties argument. Don't tell me what I can do in my car. Don't dictate everything through law. A lot of people will argue, we're small government people, we're Reagan Republicans, less legislation is better. We don't like Big Brother watching us. So that's what we hear most of the time. I think we obviously need to be sensitive to these issues. I would tell you also, we in many states, we get pushback from the Black Caucus members. And there's a real issue that when traffic laws are put in place, they tend to be disproportionately applied to people of color. I mean, those are facts, and that ends up, becoming a kind of an issue that has to be addressed. Relative to people not engaging with the safe driving apps, I do think the largest argument that I hear is people concerned about privacy, or people that start to realize that maybe they're not as good of a driver. I'm always amazed at the Cambridge data that says 90% of the people think they're better than average or something like that. So I think that people really understand that if their driving is being monitored in some way, that they may be penalized for it. So those are the arguments I hear from legislators, and also from consumers, users that are a little hesitant to use the technology. And I can just say one other thing about, because we were talking about other technologies for roadways. I mean, we're all optimistic that autonomous vehicles will eventually solve this problem. I think we know the data says 94% of the crashes that occur are due to some form of human error. So if we can eliminate the human, but we all know that that's going to be a long time coming. And at 1.3 million people being killed each year, we don't have time to wait for autonomous. So we have to do a number of these other items. And while I'm on my soapbox, I'll just mention one other thing. You notice I always refer to these as crashes. A lot of the victims' families, a lot of the people that I work with, they cringe when they hear the word accident, because accident implies that it's truly an accident. And we know that most of these crashes are not accidents at all. These are people making bad decisions and demonstrating bad behavior. These are crashes. These are not accidents.
That is such a good point. Let's call them crashes. You're right. I think, Hari and Todd, I'd love your take on this as well, around, since you're focused on building the underlying tech, how do you think about privacy?
It's a huge issue that we're always thinking about, right? Because as a computer science, data privacy is something that we want to make sure is embedded in everything we do, so that our users don't have regret. So in the case of trips, what we do is we don't require any user-specific data. We don't require their name. We don't require their address. So in fact, what we're doing as we promote the app is we're telling people that we really don't care. So not only do we protect their privacy, but we try to educate them on why their individual identity isn't important to us, because really what we're doing is analyzing aggregate data. And so as they begin to understand that, we found that people are receptive to, sharing their driving practices, not only with us, but mainly with themselves to get better. So back, I think Steve mentioned this at the beginning, it's really about education. And once people are educated, they realize that in this case, privacy really isn't an issue.
Yeah, I'd just add that it's really important to just be very clear on what data is being collected and what it's being used for, and don't do anything else other than what you say you do with it.
It's a great point. Being very transparent about the use of data. Precious and Amanda, you are also building these apps. Has that been your perspective as well?
Yes, happy to go first. For sure. I mean, particularly in insurance, where the risk of bad behavior is worse. I mean, in terms of, for example, the outcome of a claim. So it's important for us. For example, your claim can be rejected if you were speeding, but I just want to clarify that we don't use telematics data to influence a claim at all. So it's something that we need to make very clear upfront to consumers so that they can put their minds at ease. So the way we use the telematics program is, firstly, it's a carrot more than a stick, in that we provide incentives to help you naturally improve your driving behavior. If you see the benefits, it has spillover effects in terms of your risk and then your premium, etc. And so therefore you actually willingly behave, but we would never use the data in the event of a claim. So telematics data is not used at all. So similar to what Harry says, in terms of, we're very clear, it's about incentivizing you to drive well, or we use it in the Vitality Drive program, but we'll never use it in the instance of a claim.
I don't have a tremendous amount to add. I thought Hari summarized it incredibly well. Every user has to agree to terms and conditions where how the data is being utilized is spelled out transparently. And so I think our position is very similar to what has already been shared.
Great, thank you so much. Another question came through about, the question is, where can I find the data Hari shared at a high level at the beginning of the call? And I think CMT has published a distracted driving report, which is on the website. Is that right, Hari? Is that the best place to find this data?
Yeah.
Awesome, great. Cool. So I think we only have 5 more minutes remaining. So I'd love to end on 2 folks. Todd, first, I'd love for you to give us insights into, from the perspective of your students, on how we can make an impact on road safety. And then Hari, I'd like to end with you next. Go ahead, Todd. Oh, Todd, you're on mute.
Excuse me. The thing with students is that they're very adept and used to and accustomed to using their phone apps for all kinds of things. And with respect to distracted driving, they seem to be amazingly receptive to app control restrictions on what they could potentially do in their vehicle. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, there's students that will say, hey, if there's a certain threshold that I've reached where it's likely that I am distracted, then I'm okay with my phone shutting my music off, shutting the conversation off, or doing whatever is necessary to ensure that I don't go over the limit or crash. So I think that is really the key, is kind of understanding that sweet spot where young people are really acceptive of the technology that can help them improve not only their safe driver, but achieve better outcomes.
Thank you for that perspective. Hari, final word to you.
Well, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank everyone on the panel for their wonderful insights. And Abby, thank you for moderating it. I know we have had many questions. I thought I'd spend a minute or two with some of the questions that I think we didn't get to. So Dennis asks, what is the perspective on apps like Waze that are meant to improve driving? It's a great question. I actually think that technology and apps, especially when the interface for you using the app is through a car system, I think are a great idea. Waze itself is an interesting one because I actually don't see it as an app that improves my driving. I see it as an app that fundamentally is about optimizing or at least making you feel like you're optimizing the amount of time that you spend driving. And it's interesting because we've done a number of I would say, more informal studies comparing different navigation or traffic navigation systems. And Waze is in particular one that seems to keep you on the move all the time. So it takes you to all these really, back roads and lots of left turns, and, kind of almost wants to keep you moving so you don't feel like you're stuck in congestion. And as such, I don't feel like it's that particular app is one that necessarily improves my driving, particularly as it often takes me on, on the streets, takes people on streets that involve maybe potentially more risky maneuvers. And the reason I sort of bring this up is that one of the areas of work that we've done research on is understanding the risk of roads inherently. So you take the world's best drivers and the world's best vehicles, the most safest vehicles and drivers, and you put them on roads, and there's an extrinsic risk of getting into a crash because of the way the roads are laid out, the other vehicles on the road, and the behavior of other people on the road. And so there's an extrinsic crash risk. So I actually think that a version of that type of an app that focuses on safety might actually be pretty interesting and viable. There's a comment on the auditory attention. I'm a big fan of that personally. I think that keeping your eyes on the road is the most important thing that one could be doing. And it is, a lot of us listen to podcasts or music while driving. And I think interacting in a voice-based way is certainly the way of the future. That said, I also see that cars are kind of getting into, larger and larger screens. And I actually find myself in one of the cars I have has it does have a big screen and everything is through the screen. And now I've just found that my distraction has moved away from my, phone. Not that I was distracted, but we all use our phones a little bit while driving. But I am distracted by that large screen. So to bring it all together, I think that it is really important to bring together technology, policy, and awareness into a bag of solutions. There is not a single silver bullet to the problem of reducing road crashes, because the risk is associated with behavior of drivers. It's associated with vehicle risk, and it's associated with the extrinsic road risk. And as we look forward to the next, say, to the end of this decade and getting into the next decade, I think it is inevitable that there is going to be more and more and more technology in all of our systems, in our vehicles, but I think hopefully in infrastructure as well. For example, could we use data to figure out where people are most distracted or where people are most dangerous, and put digital signage there, telling people to take their eyes, put their eyes back on the road? Can we use this information to improve the design of roads so we can move bus stops if they're too close to an intersection, causing a lot of hard braking? So I think that for the first time, I think we have a lot of this type of insight available. And as we head into the decade of autonomy, I think that these types of technologies around sensing and artificial intelligence, become even more paramount, because I think that whether you're an insurer of the future or a car maker of the future or an infrastructure person of the future, the ability to harness sensor data and draw intelligence from it to make decisions is going to be the way we make roads and drivers safer. So I think it's an exciting time for our field, but and the problems have never been more important.
Well, Abby, I think that brings us to the top of the hour.
All right. Thank you, Barry. Thank you to the panelists for joining us today.